close your eyes. Let the sounds of your world fade into a gentle hum. Tonight, we journey beyond the familiar shores of reality. We travel to a place whispered into existence by a strange signal from the deep. What if I told you there is a world where to fall is to rise? Where a fire casts not warmth, but a profound and beautiful cold? Where endings are simply beginnings, seen from a different perspective? Tonight's lecture is not about the universe you know. It is about its reflection, its opposite. We are going to visit a newly discovered planet where the fundamental laws of physics seem to work in reverse. Prepare to drift into a deep and restful sleep as we explore the impossible beauty of a world that defies everything we thought we knew. This is the story of Antihtton. For centuries, our understanding of the cosmos has been built upon a set of unwavering principles. Gravity, a force that pulls matter together, shaping stars, planets, and entire galaxies. Thermodynamics, the laws that govern the flow of heat and energy, always moving from hot to cold, from order to disorder. Causality, the simple, unbreakable chain of cause and effect. These are the pillars of our reality, the grammar of the cosmic language. Telescopes like Kepler and the James Webb have peered into the darkness, finding thousands of worlds. But all of them, in their own unique ways, played by these same rules. They orbited, they cooled, they existed in a way that made sense, until the signal came. It was not a message. It was not a call from an intelligent civilization. It was a stream of data from a distant star system, data that seemed corrupted, impossible, light signatures that bent the wrong way, thermal readings that cooled as they approached their star. It was a cosmic paradox, a puzzle that physicists initially dismissed as an error. But the data was consistent, and so a mission was conceived, a long, silent journey to see this anomaly firsthand, a voyage to the place our instruments told us could not exist. Our journey begins in the silent hum of deep space. For years, our vessel drifted through the familiar, predictable void. The stars ahead were sharp, unwavering points of light against the black velvet of space. But as we crossed an invisible threshold, a boundary trillions of miles from our destination, something began to change. The light from the star system we were approaching, which we named the Morpheus system, began to behave strangely. Instead of the light from the star bending around the planets as gravity dictates, it seemed to be unbent, pushed away. The space around the system didn't curve inward. It convexed, like a bubble in the fabric of space-time. The planets, when viewed through our telescopes, had a peculiar clarity, as if the space around them was actively repelling the light of other stars, creating a zone of impossible purity. It was our first clue that the word gravity would have a different meaning here. The instruments, which had been our reliable guides, began to show readings that felt like a dream. We were approaching a place that was not pulling us in, but gently, persistently, holding us at arm's length. The very concept of an orbit had to be recalculated. We would not be caught by this world. We would have to carefully, intentionally fall towards it. This journey was no longer just about distance, but about unlearning the most basic instinct of the universe as we knew it. Every law we had memorized, every equation we trusted, was about to be turned upside down. The ship's gentle hum was now a lullaby, carrying us towards the great unknown, towards a world that promised to rewrite the story of creation. The darkness outside was no longer empty, but filled with a new kind of physics, a new set of possibilities, whispering to us as we drifted closer and closer into the heart of the anomaly. The calm in the cockpit was profound, a shared meditation among the crew as we watched the universe we knew dissolve, replaced by a reflection that was as beautiful as it was baffling. The journey was transforming us, preparing us for the reality of Antihton. As we drew nearer, the planet Antihton resolved from a point of light into a marbled sphere of soft blues and gentle greens. It looked, from a distance, remarkably like home. But the closer we got, the more the beautiful illusion unraveled. Its atmosphere swirled in patterns that defied fluid dynamics. Clouds did not drift. They seemed to be anchored, flowing in intricate, stationary rivers across the sky. The most profound moment came when we finally entered the upper atmosphere. The ship's engines went silent as we began our descent. But there was no lurch, no pull. Instead, we felt a gentle, buoyant force from below. It was like sinking into an ocean of air, but in reverse. The ship was not falling. It was being repelled by the planet's mass. This was anti-gravity, or as the science team began to call it, levity. The planet was actively, gently pushing us away. To land, we had to use our engines to thrust downward, fighting against the constant upward pressure. Looking out the viewport was a dizzying, hypnotic experience. Flakes of ice from the upper atmosphere were not falling past us, but gracefully ascending from below, like a snowstorm in reverse. They drifted up past our window on their journey to the highest, coldest reaches of the sky. The very act of down had to be recalibrated in our minds. The ground was not a destination we would fall to, but a ceiling we had to carefully approach. It was a profound and deeply calming realization. The universe, in its infinite genius, had created a place where the fear of falling did not exist. Here, to let go was not to plummet, but to soar. The soft glow of the planet below us became our sky, a beautiful, welcoming surface that promised not an impact, but a gentle arrival. The physics of this place was a lullaby, replacing the harsh laws of our home with a softer, gentler alternative. We were floating, suspended between the void above and a world that did not want to crush us, but to lift us up. Our first landing was on a vast, mossy plain. The ship settled, its thrusters powering down as the planet's natural levity was perfectly countered by our vessel's mass. Stepping out onto the surface of Antihton was the most surreal moment of our lives. The air was cool and sweet. Above us, there was no sky, only the infinite, star-dusted blackness of space. The sky was below us. The ground we stood on felt solid, yet there was a constant, almost imperceptible sense of being lifted. We looked up, and our minds struggled to comprehend the view. Great mountains, their peaks capped in shimmering ice, did not rise from the ground. They hung from the hazy blue ceiling of the atmosphere, their vast bodies suspended in the air like colossal chandeliers. Their peaks pointed down, towards us. Rivers flowed not down their sides, but up their inverted slopes, disappearing into the clouds that clung to their bases, high above. We were standing on the floor of this world, looking up at a landscape that was entirely upside down. It was a geological diorama, beautiful and strange. We watched as a gentle rain began to fall, but the drops did not descend from the clouds above. They formed in the pools of water and moist ground around us, coalescing into perfect spheres that then began to lift, slowly at first, then with more purpose, ascending into the air. A shower of rising water, each droplet a tiny jewel catching the light of the distant sun as it floated up, up, up to join the low-hanging clouds. The sound was a soft, continuous hiss, the opposite of a rainstorm. It was the sound of the ground, giving its water back to the sky. This world was a place of gentle release. There was no struggle against gravity, only a surrender to the lift. Even the plants seemed to understand this. The trees grew downwards from the floating islands of soil high above, their branches reaching for the ground, while the flowers on the surface grew on long, impossibly thin stems, straining as if to release themselves from the soil and float away. It was a world built on a foundation of buoyancy, a world where everything yearned for the sky. We ventured towards one of the inverted mountain ranges, its shadow cast not upon the ground, but across the starfield above. These were the hanging Sierras, as we called them. To explore them, we didn't need to climb. We needed to ascend. Using simple propulsion packs, we lifted off the ground, drifting slowly upwards towards the downward-pointing peaks. The feeling was not of flight, but of controlled floating, like divers in a slow-motion ocean. As we rose, the world unfolded below us, a vast green tapestry under a ceiling of blue haze. The experience was profoundly meditative. There was no fear of falling, only the gentle hum of our packs and the silent spectacle of a world reversed. We reached the base of one of the mountains, which was, of course, its highest point. Here, vast, fluffy clouds gathered, fed by the constant upward stream of mist and rising rain. We floated through these clouds, the moisture cool on our skin. Inside the clouds, the world was a soft, diffuse white, a place of pure tranquility. Emerging above them, we were met with a breathtaking sight. The entire mountain range hung suspended in the air, a chain of rocky islands in an atmospheric sea. Waterfalls flowed in reverse, great plumes of spray erupting from rivers below and surging up the rock faces to pool in crystalline lakes nestled among the peaks. These sky lakes were perfectly calm, their surfaces reflecting the distant ground and the star-dusted void in a single, impossible image. We saw the planet's flora in more detail here. Vines, heavy with fruit, hung down like beaded curtains, their roots anchored in the rock far above. Strange bell-shaped flowers opened downwards, releasing pollen that didn't fall, but drifted in lazy spirals towards the ground. Miles below, the silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of our own breathing. We were visitors in a Zen garden the size of a continent, a place where the rules of physics had conspired to create a landscape of impossible peace. To be here was to understand that our perception of up and down is just a local custom, a habit of our homeworld. Here, the universe offered a different perspective, one that was gentle, serene, and utterly beautiful. The true nature of Антихтон's star, which we named Helios Beta, revealed itself with the coming of what we would call day. On Earth, the sun brings warmth and light. Here, its effects were inverted, as the pale white star rose above the horizon, or rather, became visible in the void above. The temperature began to drop. The star's light was bright, but it was a cold, sterile light. Its radiation, through a process that baffled our physicists, seemed to promote endothermic reactions on a planetary scale. It did not add energy to the system. It actively drew it out. The sunlight on Antihton was a catalyst for cold. We watched, mesmerized, as the gentle, upward falling rain began to freeze mid-ascent, turning into delicate crystals of rising snow. The surfaces of the sky lakes began to form thin, intricate sheets of ice. The mossy ground beneath our feet grew crisp with frost. A campfire, which we lit as an experiment, was the most profound demonstration of this reverse thermodynamics. Instead of radiating heat, the flames drew it in. The area immediately around the fire became intensely cold. A circle of frost formed on the ground, spreading outwards from the dancing, blue flames. The fire was a heat sink, a beautiful, mesmerizing vortex of cold. To warm ourselves, we had to move away from the fire into the ambient air that was slowly losing its warmth to the flames. The fire consumed the wood, but its output was not heat and light, but cold and a soft, ethereal glow. This was a world where you would freeze to death by sitting next to a roaring bonfire. A world where shadows were warmer than sunlight. The implications were staggering. Life here would not seek the sun for energy, but perhaps hibernate in its cold glare, becoming active in the warmth of the darkness. It was a complete reversal of the life-giving properties we associate with a star. The sun was not a source of comfort, but a beautiful, silent refrigerator, slowly, gracefully, pulling the warmth from its world. As the day wore on, we found ourselves seeking shelter, not from a burning heat, but from a pervasive, encroaching chill that the starlight brought with it. And then came the night, as Helios Beta sank below the horizon, plunging the world into the soft light of distant nebulae and the planet's 2 small moons. The world began to warm. With the cold-inducing star gone, the planet's own internal heat, or perhaps some other unknown energy source, was allowed to radiate outwards. The frost on the ground began to melt, releasing a gentle, rising mist. The air, which had been crisp and cold, became soft and balmy. The night was a time of warmth and activity. Strange bioluminescent fungi on the ground began to glow with a soft, pulsating light, their gentle radiance warming the air around them. The cold flames of our experimental campfire died down, and the circle of intense frost around it slowly thawed. We realized that on Antihton, darkness was synonymous with comfort, with warmth, with life. We ventured out into this warm, glowing night, and the world felt entirely different. It was alive. Sounds we hadn't heard during the cold day began to emerge. The gentle chirping of unseen creatures, the soft rustle of plants unfurling their leaves in the temperate dark. We saw them then, the fauna of Antihton. Small, 6-legged creatures emerged from burrows in the ground. Their bodies were covered in a thick, insulating pelt, not to protect them from the cold, but presumably to retain the warmth of the night during the freezing day. They moved slowly, gracefully, feeding on the glowing fungi. In the sky lakes high above, larger, winged creatures took flight, their forms silhouetted against the star-dusted void. They didn't fly by flapping their wings to push against the air. They seemed to adjust their own buoyancy, inflating and deflating complex gas bladders to rise and sink in the air, steering with their delicate, fan-like tails. They were living balloons, navigating the inverted world with an effortless grace. The night was the planet's true day. It was a time of gentle heat, of soft light from the ground, of life emerging to thrive in the absence of the sun. It was a powerful lesson in perspective. We, who had always associated darkness with cold and fear, were now experiencing it as a comforting, life-giving embrace. The universe, it seemed, had more than one way to nurture life. The most challenging, most mind-altering discovery on Antihtton was yet to come. It was something our instruments had hinted at, but which our minds refused to accept until we saw the evidence directly. It concerned the nature of time itself and its relationship with entropy. On Earth, entropy is the law that things tend towards disorder. A cup falls and shatters. A star burns its fuel and dies. A living thing is born, ages, and passes away. It is the arrow of time, always moving from order to chaos, from past to future. On Antihtton, the arrow seemed to point in the other direction. We first noticed it with simple things. A rock we accidentally dislodged from a cliff edge did not just fall upwards. It settled back into its exact original position, the dust around it reforming the pattern of its resting place. We saw puddles of water spontaneously separate into individual, rising droplets, a perfect reversal of rainfall. But the most stunning example was a grove of strange, crystalline trees. In the center of the grove lay a pile of glittering, shattered shards. As we watched over several cycles of warm night and cold day, a miracle unfolded. The shards on the ground began to vibrate. Slowly, they lifted into the air, finding each other, fitting together with impossible precision. A fractured branch reassembled itself, then another. Over time, the entire tree was rebuilding itself from its own ruins. It was not growing, it was unshattering. The tree was moving backwards through time, from a state of high entropy, a pile of broken pieces, to a state of low entropy, a perfectly formed tree. This was reverse entropy. This was time flowing on a local, physical level, from chaos to order. The implications were almost too vast to comprehend. If a broken tree could reassemble itself, what did that mean for life? What did that mean for the concepts of birth and death? We were standing in a world where the past was not a fixed memory, but a future state of decay that things were actively moving away from. The future was a state of perfect, pristine order that things were striving to return to. The end of the tree's life was not in its shattering, but in its perfect, unbroken form before the event that had destroyed it. The shattered state was its beginning. This principle of reverse entropy led us to observe the planet's life cycles, and what we found felt like something from a myth. We found a creature, a large, slow-moving grazer, lying still on the mossy plains. It was ancient, its hide wrinkled, and its movements feeble. We thought we were witnessing its final moments. We were wrong. We were witnessing its first. Over the following days, the creature did not weaken. It grew stronger. Its wrinkled hide became smoother. Its movements became more confident. It was growing younger. The creatures of Antihton were born at the moment of their death, emerging into the world ancient and frail. Their entire lives were a journey backwards from old age to adolescence, to childhood, to infancy. They did not accumulate memories of the past. They seemed to possess a kind of instinct about the future. They would move away from a spot where a rock was going to be dislodged. They would gather near a place where a new patch of glowing fungi was about to appear. They experienced causality in reverse. The effect came before the cause. A footprint would appear in the soft moss, and moments later, one of the creatures would walk backwards into it, lifting its foot perfectly from the depression. It was a beautiful, dizzying dance of predestination. Death was not an end, but a beginning. Birth was not a beginning, but a final destination, a return to a state of non-existence. They lived their lives in reverse, shedding the burdens of age, regaining the energy of youth, their final moments being their most vibrant and powerful before they simply vanished, presumably returning to the elemental components from which they were first dead. It was a world without decay, a world where everything was on a path of restoration. It was profoundly peaceful. There was no tragedy in an end, because an end was simply the start of the story. The language of this universe was written in opposites. Consider the simple act of a river. On Earth, a river is a story of entropy. Water, pulled by gravity, flows from a high, ordered source, a mountain spring, down to the chaotic, sprawling sea. It is a one-way journey of descent and dispersal. On Antihton, the story is retold, but the pages are turned from back to front. The great oceans of this world were not in basins on the ground, but held by atmospheric pressure and the planet's levity as vast undulating sheets of water high in the sky. These were the celestial seas. From these chaotic, sprawling bodies of water, rivers would form. They would begin as wide, slow-moving currents in the sky ocean, then narrow, gathering speed and order as they flowed downward, which on Antihton meant towards the ground. But they didn't crash. Instead, they flowed along the undersides of the floating continents, adhering to the rock through surface tension, carving canyons into the bottom of the hanging mountains. Finally, these rivers would flow up the inverted mountain slopes, becoming ever narrower, ever purer, until they reached the highest peak, which was the point closest to the ground. There, the river would culminate in a spring, a point where the water would dissipate as a fine, rising mist, completing the cycle by returning to the celestial seas. It was a perfect, closed loop of anti-entropy. The river's journey was not one of decay, but of refinement. It flowed from the chaotic sea to the pure spring. It was a powerful metaphor for the entire planet. Everything here was on a journey of return, a pilgrimage back to a state of simplicity and order. Standing on the ground, looking up at these silver ribbons of water flowing across the bottom of the world, was like watching a divine plumbing system, one designed not to drain, but to eternally replenish. It was a system that whispered a profound truth. Perhaps the universe doesn't have to run down. Perhaps, somewhere, it is also building itself back up. The very air we breathed told a story of this inverted reality. Our analysis showed it was a nitrogen-oxygen mix, comfortable and familiar. But its behavior was alien. On Earth, warm air rises and cool air sinks, creating wind and weather systems. Here, the principle was reversed due to the peculiar thermodynamics. During the cold day, as the ground was chilled by the star, the air near the surface would become dense and warm relative to the intensely cold upper atmosphere. This warm air would sink, or rather, it would be pushed down by the colder air above it, which was less affected by the planet's levity. This created gentle, persistent breezes that flowed from the hanging mountains towards the plains. But during the warm night, as the ground radiated heat, the air near the surface would become truly warm. This warm air, being less dense, would be more susceptible to the planet's levity. It would rise. This created powerful updrafts, great columns of warm air ascending towards the celestial seas. These updrafts were the planet's circulatory system. They carried the pollen of the ground-dwelling plants upwards, fertilizing the downward-growing flora on the floating continents. They carried the rising rain and mist, replenishing the sky oceans. The sound of the wind was different here. It was not the mournful howl of air rushing over land, but a deep, resonant hum, the vibration of the entire atmosphere in a state of constant, gentle turnover. Breathing the air felt like inhaling peace itself. It was clean, pure, and carried the faint, sweet scent of the glowing night fungi and the damp, mossy earth. There were no violent storms here, no hurricanes or tornadoes. The weather systems were as gentle as the rest of the planet. They were slow, predictable, and rhythmic. It was a world without atmospheric rage. The weather was not something to be endured, but a constant, soothing presence, another layer in the planet's grand, tranquil design. To sit and feel the breeze was to feel the slow, steady pulse of a world breathing in a way that was completely opposite to our own. Exploring the geology of Antihtton was like reading a book written in a language we had to learn from scratch. On Earth, mountains are formed by tectonic plates crashing together, pushing the crust upwards against the force of gravity. They are monuments to immense pressure and conflict. Here, the hanging mountains were formed by a process of tectonic subtraction. We theorized that great sections of the planet's crust would, over eons, lose just enough mass, perhaps through some form of radioactive decay unique to this world, that the planet's levity would overcome their connection to the surface. They would gently, slowly lift off, becoming floating continents. The inverted mountains were not the result of compression, but of release. They were not jagged and sharp from violent uplift, but smooth and rounded, shaped by the slow, graceful ascent through the atmosphere. The canyons carved into their undersides by the anti-entropic rivers were like delicate filigree, patterns of erosion that spoke of gentle persistence rather than violent force. The caves that riddled these mountains were not dark, dripping voids. They were filled with a soft, ambient light from phosphorescent minerals that charged during the warm night and released their glow during the cold day. Entering a cave was like stepping into a cathedral of glowing crystal. There were no stalactites or stalagmites. Instead, crystals grew in beautiful, spherical clusters, suspended in the center of the caverns, held in a perfect equilibrium between the levity of the planet and the molecular bonds holding them together. These cave pearls would slowly rotate, casting intricate patterns of light on the walls. It was geology born not of pressure, but of buoyancy, not of violence, but of a quiet, persistent lift. The planet was not a solid, angry ball of rock, but a delicate, layered structure, a piece of cosmic art, where even the stones seemed to yearn for the sky. Every rock, every crystal, every grain of sand was a testament to a softer, more graceful set of physical laws. The sounds of Antihtton were a symphony of tranquility. In the absence of harsh winds and crashing waves, the planet was profoundly quiet. The dominant sound was a low, subtle hum, which we eventually identified as the vibration of the planet itself, a resonant frequency created by the interplay of its unique gravity and mass. It was a sound you felt in your bones as much as you heard with your ears, a constant, soothing mantra. Against this backdrop of silence, other sounds emerged with a startling clarity. The soft, collective hiss of the rising rain, the gentle, chime-like tinkling of the ascending ice crystals during the cold day, the quiet, rhythmic chirps of the nocturnal creatures, sound that were not for warning or aggression, but seemed to be simple expressions of existence, of presence. We never heard a roar, a scream, or a cry of pain. The ecosystem here seemed to operate on a principle of harmony, not conflict. Even the plants made a sound. The strange, crystalline trees, as they slowly reassembled themselves, emitted a faint, high-pitched ringing, the sound of matter finding its proper place, of order being restored. We recorded these sounds, and the resulting audio file was the most effective sleep aid we had ever encountered. It was the sound of a world without struggle, a world where the laws of physics themselves promoted peace. In our own world, sound is often a warning, a sign of energy being violently expended, a thunderclap, a rock slide, a predator's call. Here, sound was a confirmation of serenity. It was the universe whispering that everything was all right, that everything was in its right place, or on its gentle journey back to it. Listening to the soundscape of Antihtton was a form of meditation, a way of attuning oneself to a slower, quieter, more harmonious frequency of existence. It was the music of a world at peace with itself. The two moons of Antihtton, which we named Hypnos and Phobator, were unlike any moons we had ever seen. They did not orbit the planet in the traditional sense, held captive by its gravity. Instead, they were locked in a complex gravitational dance, constantly being pushed away by Antihton's levity and pulled in by the sun's gravity and each other's. The result was that they didn't circle the planet. They wove intricate, looping patterns in the sky like celestial dancers. Hypnos, the larger moon, was a smooth, dark obsidian sphere. It absorbed light, creating a perfect circle of absolute blackness against the star field. It had a calming, void-like presence. Phobator, the smaller moon, was the opposite. It was a jagged, crystalline body that seemed to amplify light. It captured the light of distant stars and nebulae and refracted it, scattering beams of soft, colored light across the planet's surface during the warm night. Watching them move was a hypnotic spectacle. They would drift towards each other, then gently repel, swing away in wide arcs, then slowly return. Their movement was a visual representation of the forces at play in this system, a constant, gentle push and pull. Sometimes Phobator would pass in front of Hypnos, and the result was not an eclipse, but a stunning light show. The crystalline moon would gather the starlight that would have been blocked by the dark moon and focus it into a single, soft beam that would paint a moving circle of light on the ground below. The nocturnal creatures would gather in this circle of light, not for warmth, but seemingly for the sheer beauty of it. The moons were not just passive satellites. They were an active part of the planet's environment, a celestial clock, and a cosmic art installation. They were a reminder that even in this reversed system, the dance of celestial bodies retained its power to inspire awe and wonder. Their silent, graceful ballet in the void above was the perfect visual accompaniment to the planet's tranquil symphony. Let's consider the nature of light and color on Antihtton. With an atmosphere that was constantly being replenished from the ground up, it was remarkably free of dust and pollutants. The clarity of the air was absolute. This had a profound effect on how we perceived color. On Earth, colors at a distance are muted by the haze in the air, a phenomenon called atmospheric perspective. Here there was no such effect. A hanging mountain 100 miles away appeared with the same vibrant color and sharp detail as the rock beneath our feet. This created a sense of scale that was both vast and intimate. The entire world felt close, accessible, like a miniature model of perfect clarity. The light from the cold sun, Helios Beta, was a pure white light containing all wavelengths of the spectrum. The planet's flora had adapted to this in a unique way. Plants on the ground were mostly deep greens and soft blues, colors that were efficient at absorbing the energy needed for their unique form of photosynthesis, a process that, we theorized, was also endothermic, contributing to the planet's cooling during the day. But the downward growing plants on the floating continents were a riot of brilliant reds, oranges, and yellows. They had no need for photosynthesis, as they seemed to draw their energy directly from the minerals in the rock. Their colors were purely for display, perhaps to attract the buoyant, balloon-like creatures that served as their pollinators. The result was a world with a color palette split in two, a cool, calming floor of blues and greens, and a vibrant, warm ceiling of reds and oranges. The visual experience was perfectly balanced, a work of natural art. At the terminator line, where the warm night met the cold day, these colors would blend in a soft, ethereal twilight that lasted for hours, a long, slow-motion sunset that was happening at ground level, not on the horizon. The soil on Antihtton was not soil as we know it. It was not a product of decay, of fallen leaves and dead organisms breaking down over millennia. Here, with reverse entropy, the process was inverted. The soil was a complex, living matrix of minerals and microbes that was actively engaged in a process of synthesis. It didn't consume organic matter. It seemed to produce it. We watched as small, complex molecules spontaneously formed in the crystalline structure of the ground, growing into the nutrients that fed the glowing fungi and other ground-level plants. It was as if the ground itself was fertile with a spark of life, constantly creating the building blocks from nothing. This process was most active during the warm night. The ground would literally hum with this creative energy, and the bioluminescent glow of the fungi was a direct byproduct of this spontaneous generation of complex molecules. The ground was not a graveyard of the past, but a cradle for the future. We took samples, and their structure was unlike anything we had ever seen. It was a perfect lattice, almost like a living computer chip, designed for the sole purpose of turning chaos into order, simple elements into complex life. Walking on this ground felt like walking on a living thing. It was soft, springy, and seemed to respond to our presence with a gentle vibration. It was a world without dirt, without decay, without the smell of decomposition. Everything was clean, pure, and in a state of constant, gentle creation. It changed our very definition of what it meant for a planet to be alive. Antihtton was not just a rock with life on it. The rock itself was an integral, active part of that life, the engine of its unique, restorative biology. The concept of memory, both for the planet's inhabitants and for us, the observers, became a fascinating subject of meditation. The creatures of Antihtton, living their lives from age to youth, did not possess memory of the past. How could they? Their past was their future state of being young. Instead, they seemed to have a form of pre-memory, an instinctual knowledge of what was about to happen. They moved with a serene certainty, never making a mistake, because they had already remembered the outcome. It was not intelligence as we define it, but a perfect attunement to the reversed flow of time. For us, the experience was different. Being on Antihtton felt like living inside a memory. The reassembling trees, the rivers flowing back to their source, the creatures growing younger. It all felt like watching a film being played in reverse. It was profoundly nostalgic, but for a past that wasn't ours. It triggered a deep sense of peace, the kind one feels when looking at old photographs from a happy time. The planet itself was a monument to this feeling. It was a world that was constantly returning to a state of perfection, erasing its own scars, healing its own wounds. A broken cliff face would, over centuries, reform. A species driven to the brink would see its numbers grow as its members aged backwards towards their fertile youth. It was a world without permanent loss. This had a strange effect on our own minds, our anxieties about the future, our regrets about the past, began to feel distant and unimportant. On Antihtton, the past was being fixed, and the future was a known state of pristine order. The linear, often painful march of time that defined our lives was replaced by a gentle, cyclical, and ultimately hopeful rhythm. We were learning the planet's greatest lesson, that every end is just a path back to a beautiful beginning. Let's imagine the life of a single being on this world, not with our human emotions, but with the senses of this place. It begins as a memory of warmth and vigor, a faint echo of a vibrant youth it has not yet reached. Its first conscious moments are of stillness, of ancient bones and slow thoughts. It emerges into the world fully formed, a creature of immense age. Its first meal is a struggle, its old limbs clumsy. But with each passing cycle of warm night and cold day, the struggle lessens. The limbs grow stronger, the senses sharper. The world, which at first seemed muted and distant, comes into focus. Colors become more vibrant. Sounds become clearer. The journey of its life is one of continuous improvement, of shedding limitations. It does not learn from mistakes. It simply unmakes them as it moves backward in time to before they happened. Its social bonds are strange. It meets its own children as adults and watches them grow younger, becoming the small, dependent creatures it will eventually care for. It meets its own parents as infants, caring for them before they grow younger still and vanish. Its life is a long, slow greeting, a journey towards connection, rather than away from it. The peak of its existence is its youth, a time of boundless energy, of perfect health, of complete harmony with its environment. This is not a fleeting moment to be clung to, but the destination of its entire life's journey. And then, at the pinnacle of its strength and beauty, it simply ceases to be, its component parts returning to the creative soil. There is no fear, no pain, no decay. Just a graceful exit at the height of perfection. A life without the tragedy of aging. A life where every day is better than the last. It is a beautiful, peaceful, and utterly alien way to exist. The oceans of Antihtton, the great celestial seas, were a universe unto themselves. We sent probes ascending into them, and the images they sent back were breathtaking. These were not saltwater oceans like on Earth. They were vast bodies of fresh, incredibly pure water, held together in a loose, spherical shape by the atmosphere's pressure. Within them, there was no up or down. Buoyancy was uniform in all directions. Life here was truly three-dimensional. Vast plant-like structures, like translucent kelp forests, grew in intricate spiral patterns, their fronds catching the faint starlight. Creatures resembling iridescent jellyfish, some as large as our own ship, drifted through the water, propelling themselves with gentle, rhythmic pulses of light. They did not seem to eat, but to absorb nutrients directly from the hyper-oxygenated water. The probe's sensors detected complex, low-frequency sound waves passing through the water, a form of communication, a slow, melodic language of the deep sky. The floor of this ocean was the underside of the atmosphere itself, a shimmering, elastic membrane where the water met the void of space. The surface was the hazy blue ceiling we saw from the ground. It was a world within a world, a vast, tranquil aquarium suspended in the sky. To imagine swimming there is to imagine a state of perfect freedom, of effortless movement in a silent, glowing world. It was the source of all the planet's water, the heart of its unique hydrological cycle, and a place of profound, untouchable serenity. The celestial seas were Antihton's soul, a quiet, contemplative space that governed the gentle rhythms of the world below. The chemical composition of Antihton held its own secrets. While we found familiar elements like oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon, they were often bound in molecular structures that were energetically unfavorable by our standards. It was as if the planet's chemistry preferred complexity and order over simplicity and stability. This is the heart of its reverse entropy. On Earth, chemical reactions tend to release energy and break down complex molecules into simpler ones. Here, the opposite was true. The background energy of the planet, perhaps a unique form of zero-point radiation, encouraged simple molecules to spontaneously assemble into more complex ones. absorbing ambient energy in the process. This is why the fire was cold. It was a runaway chemical reaction that was absorbing thermal energy to fuel the creation of complex polymers from the carbon in the wood. It is why the soil could create nutrients. It was a planet-wide, slow-motion process of creation. This had profound implications for the origin of life. On Earth, the origin of life is a great mystery, a seemingly impossible leap from simple chemistry to complex biology. On Antihtton, that leap was not just possible, it was inevitable. The planet's fundamental chemistry was biased towards the creation of complexity. Life was not a fluke. It was the ultimate expression of the planet's physical laws. The world was a self-assembling machine. This thought was both humbling and deeply comforting. It suggested that the universe is not inherently biased towards decay and death. It contains, within its infinite possibilities, the seeds of its own restoration, its own rebirth. Antihtton was not a violation of the laws of physics. It was a demonstration of a different set of laws, ones that favored life and order as the natural state of being. What would it be like to build something on Antihtton? The very concept of engineering would be inverted. On Earth, we build structures to resist gravity and decay. We use strong materials, deep foundations, and constant maintenance to fight against the inevitable pull of the Earth and the passage of time. On Antihtton, a structure would not need to resist gravity. It would need to be anchored against the constant, gentle lift. A house would not need a foundation, but a tether. It might be built from incredibly light, porous materials, like a rigid sponge, designed to have a net buoyancy that is easily managed. There would be no need for arches or load-bearing walls in the traditional sense. The main force would be the upward push of levity. There would be no rust, no rot, no decay. A structure once built would never crumble. In fact, if a part of it were to break, the principles of reverse entropy suggest that, over time, the broken piece might reaffix itself. Maintenance would not be about repair, but perhaps about preventing unwanted unbreaking. Doors would not fall off their hinges. They might slowly refuse with their frames. A city on Antihtton would be a collection of tethered, floating structures connected by suspended walkways. It would be silent, clean, and permanent. It would be a city of impossible, delicate beauty, a place where architecture could be as light and graceful as a dream. It's a peaceful thought, a world where what you create is not in a constant battle with the universe, but is supported by it, preserved by it, and even healed by it when it breaks. The philosophical implications of our stay on Antihtton were as vast as the celestial seas above us. The planet served as a perfect mirror to our own existence, forcing us to question our most fundamental assumptions. We define ourselves by our past, by the memories and experiences that have shaped us. What is a self in a world where life is a journey of unbecoming, where memory is of the future? We perceive time as a river, carrying us inexorably from a fixed past to an unknown future. What is time? When it is a circle, a process of restoration, where the end is a known state of perfection. We see the universe as a grand cosmic story that began with a bang and is heading towards a slow, cold death. What is the universe, if this is just one half of the story? Perhaps our universe of entropy is balanced by another universe of anti-entropy. Perhaps they are two sides of the same coin, a grand cosmic cycle of creation and uncreation. Antihtton was more than a scientific discovery. It was a spiritual revelation. It taught us that our reality is just one possibility among countless others. It showed us a universe where peace is the natural state, where healing is a fundamental law, and where endings are not to be feared, but to be welcomed as a return to a beautiful beginning. The gentle lift of the planet's levity felt like a metaphor for the entire experience. It lifted our spirits, expanded our minds, and allowed us to see our own existence from a new, higher perspective. It was a world that gave us not answers, but better, more beautiful questions. And in those questions, we found a profound and lasting sense of peace. Our senses, evolved for a world of gravity and entropy, were constantly being tricked and re-educated on Antihtton. Our inner ear, which gives us our sense of balance, was utterly confused. Without a constant downward pull, we often felt a sense of gentle, perpetual floating. Even when standing still, we had to rely on our eyes to tell us which way was up, or rather, which way the ground was. Our sense of touch was also redefined. On Earth, the weight of an object is a key part of how we perceive it. Here, everything felt impossibly light, almost non-existent. Holding a heavy rock felt like holding a piece of foam. The world lacked the comforting heft and solidity we were used to, but in its place was a different sensation, a feeling of unburdened lightness. Our sense of smell was heightened by the clean air, able to pick up the subtle, sweet fragrances of the creative soil and the nocturnal plants. Our sense of hearing was soothed by the profound quiet and the gentle ambient sounds. But it was our sense of sight that was most profoundly affected. To see mountains hanging from the sky, to see rain falling up, to see crystalline trees reassembling themselves. It was to witness a series of beautiful impossibilities. It rewired our brains, forcing us to create new categories for what was real. After weeks on the surface, our perception began to shift. The inverted world started to feel normal, natural. It was a testament to the incredible adaptability of the human mind. We had arrived as strangers in a world that defied logic, and we were slowly becoming accustomed to its dreamlike state, finding a new kind of logic in its beautiful reversals. Let us contemplate the absence of conflict. In our explorations, we found no evidence of predators or prey in the traditional sense. The creatures of Antihtton seemed to be part of a closed, perfectly efficient energy system. The grazers consumed the glowing fungi, and when they reached their youthful end and vanished, their energy and matter seemed to return directly to the creative soil, which in turn produced more fungi. It was a cycle of pure symbiosis. There were no carnivores, no violence, no struggle for survival. The concept of survival of the fittest seemed irrelevant in a world where life was not a competition for scarce resources, but a manifestation of the planet's inherent drive towards order. The creatures lived in a state of placid coexistence. We watched different species graze side by side, without fear or aggression. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace. Their actions governed not by instinctual fear or hunger, but by their pre-memory of the harmonious flow of events. This was perhaps the most alien aspect of the planet. We We are so accustomed to the idea that life is a battle, a constant fight against death and decay, that a world without this struggle felt profoundly utopian. It was a world that had achieved a state of ecological grace that we can only dream of. The peace of Antihtton was not just a matter of quiet landscapes and gentle weather. It was woven into the very fabric of its biology. It was the peace of a system in perfect balance with itself, a world that had no need for teeth or claws. The star, Helios Beta, itself was an anomaly that continued to puzzle our astrophysicists. By all our models, a star of its size and luminosity should be radiating immense heat, fusing hydrogen into helium in a fiery exothermic reaction. Yet our readings consistently showed that the space around the star was cooler than the surrounding interstellar medium. The star was a cosmic cold spot. The leading theory, as alien as it sounds, was that the star was running on a principle of cold fusion in reverse. It was not fusing light elements into heavier ones, but perhaps breaking down heavy elements into lighter ones, a process that, in this system's physics, absorbed vast amounts of energy. Or perhaps it was a stable gateway to a universe where thermodynamics ran backwards. A white hole that poured out not energy and matter, but anti-energy and order. The light it produced was a byproduct of this process, a form of luminescence that carried no thermal energy. It was a star that did not burn, but simply shone. Its cold, steady light had bathed Antihtton for billions of years, creating the conditions for its unique endothermic life to evolve. It was a gentle star, a quiet partner to its gentle planet. It did not scorch or burn, but simply illuminated. It was the serene, silent engine of this inverted solar system, a constant reminder that even the most fundamental forces of the cosmos, like the fire of a star, could have a peaceful, quiet counterpart somewhere in the vast, mysterious expanse of all that is. Consider the arts. Were a civilization to arise here, what would painting look like in a world without atmospheric perspective, where distant objects are as clear as near ones? Perhaps artists would focus on the subtle shifts in light and shadow, or the intricate patterns of the ground-level flora versus the downward hanging trees. Sculpture would not be a battle with gravity, but a dance with levity. An artist could create vast, intricate structures from the lightest materials, tethering them to the ground like kites, allowing them to move and sway in the gentle breezes. Music would surely be inspired by the planet's natural soundscape, the deep, resonant hum of the planet itself, the soft hiss of rising rain, the crystalline chimes of the reforming trees. It would be a music of drones and subtle textures, a minimalist, meditative art form designed to soothe, not to excite. And what of literature? Storytelling in a world with reverse causality would be a fascinating challenge. A story would not begin with a character's birth and end with their death. It would start with their ancient, final moments and trace their journey back to their vibrant, youthful disappearance. A mystery novel would start with the solution, and the plot would be the slow, deliberate process of watching the crime unhappen. It would be a literature of fate and destiny, where the ending is always known. And the beauty is in watching the inevitable, graceful unfolding of events. the art of Антихтон would be a reflection of its world, calm, ordered, beautiful, and dedicated to the celebration of a peaceful, cyclical existence. The element of fear, a primal driver of life on Earth, was conspicuously absent on Antihton. There was no fear of falling, for to fall was to rise. There was no fear of predators, for there were none. There was no fear of starvation in a world of abundant, self-replicating food. There was no fear of natural disasters on a planet with gentle weather and stable geology. And most profoundly, there was no fear of death or old age. Old age was the beginning, a state of gentle entry into the world. Death was the culmination of a long journey towards youth and perfection. The creatures of this world lived without anxiety. They moved with a serene purpose, their lives not a desperate struggle, but a graceful performance. This absence of fear created an atmosphere of complete tranquility. It was a palpable thing, an energy that permeated the entire planet. As human observers, we felt its effects profoundly. Our own ingrained fears of heights, of the dark, of the unknown, began to soften and dissolve. The constant, low-level stress that is part of the human condition was replaced by a sense of deep calm. Antihton was more than a place. It was a state of being. It was a demonstration that a world without fear is not only possible, but that it is a state of incredible beauty and harmony. It was a world that taught us that perhaps the most fundamental law we should seek to understand is not gravity or thermodynamics, but the law of peace. As we prepared for our departure, a profound sense of melancholy settled over us. Leaving Antihton felt like waking from the most beautiful dream. We would be returning to a world of gravity, of entropy, of chaos and conflict, a world where things fall and break and do not always mend. We took one last walk on the mossy plains, under the hanging mountains, and the star-dusted void. We watched the rain fall upwards, listened to the hum of the planet, and felt the gentle, persistent lift of the ground beneath our feet. We were taking with us more than just data and samples. We were taking a new perspective. The memory of Antihton would serve as a permanent touchstone, a reminder that our reality is not the only reality. It would be a source of comfort, a mental sanctuary we could retreat to in times of stress. The knowledge that such a place exists, even if it is impossibly far away, changes everything. It expands the boundaries of what is possible. It infuses the universe with a new sense of wonder and hope. The ship's engines began to hum, this time pushing us away from the ground, allowing the planet's levity to carry us back towards the stars. We did not blast off in a fiery explosion. We simply let go, and the planet gently, lovingly released us back into the void. Looking back at the marbled sphere of blue and green, it felt like leaving a place that was, in some strange, inverted way, more like home than home itself. The return journey was a time of quiet reflection. As Antihton shrank behind us, becoming once again a paradoxical point of light, we found ourselves changed. The universe outside the viewport no longer looked the same. We saw the familiar laws of our own space. The sharp, unwavering starlight, the predictable orbits, the inexorable pull of gravity with new eyes. We saw them not as the only way, but as one way. Our world, with all its beautiful, chaotic, and often painful realities, was part of a larger, more mysterious, cosmic tapestry. The memory of the upward falling rain became a metaphor for a different way of thinking. The memory of the cold fire, a symbol of how our expectations can be inverted. The memory of the creatures aging in reverse, a powerful lesson about the nature of time and the meaning of a life's journey. Антихтон had given us the ultimate gift, a glimpse of the universe's infinite creativity. It had shown us that for every law, there might be an equal and opposite law. For every reality, a mirror reflection. This knowledge was a profound comfort. It made the universe feel less like a cold, empty machine, and more like a vast, dreaming mind, capable of imagining and creating worlds of impossible beauty and peace. The gentle hum of our ship no longer sounded like a lonely vessel in the void. It sounded like a carrier of a precious secret, a story of a world that was gentle, whole, and healed. A story that we would carry back to our own world. A world that needed to hear it. Let's reflect on the core paradox. A world that defies the second law of thermodynamics, the law of increasing entropy. This law is often called time's arrow because it dictates the one-way direction of events. It is the reason why an egg, once scrambled, cannot unscramble itself. It is the reason we remember the past and not the future. Antihton did not just have weird gravity, it had a reversed arrow of time at the molecular level. This suggests that the nature of time itself might be more fundamental than the laws that govern energy. Perhaps our universe and the universe of Antihton are two different expressions of time's potential. In our universe, time flows forward and entropy increases. In its universe, time flows backward and entropy decreases. What does this mean for the grand scheme of things? It could mean that the total entropy of the multiverse remains constant. For every universe that is running down, another is building itself back up. The Big Bang of our universe could be seen as an event of ultimate order, breaking down into chaos. The end of Antihton's universe might be a big crunch, a return to a state of perfect, unified order. It's a beautiful, symmetrical idea, a cosmic yin and yang. Our journey to Antihton was not just a journey in space, but a journey to the other side of time. We stood on a world that was not dying, but being born in slow motion. A world that was not forgetting its past, but remembering its future. And in doing so, we learned that the story of the cosmos may not be a tragedy of inevitable decay, but a grand, eternal cycle of endings and beginnings. The legacy of Antihton is not just in the scientific papers or the spectral data. It is in the profound shift in consciousness it offers. To know that a world governed by levity, warmth in darkness, and restorative time exists is to hold a key to a new kind of meditation. When you feel the weight of the world, you can close your eyes and imagine the gentle, persistent lift of Antihton's surface, a force that does not pull you down, but encourages you to rise. When you feel the coldness of the world, you can remember the warm, glowing nights of Antihton, where darkness was a comforting embrace. When you are troubled by past mistakes or fear of decay, you can visualize the crystalline trees reassembling themselves, a powerful symbol of the universe's capacity for healing and restoration. Antihton becomes an internal landscape, a mental sanctuary. It is a story that proves the universe is not limited by our imagination. It is a testament to the idea that for every problem, there is a perspective from which it is not a problem at all. For every fall, there is a rise. For every ending, a new beginning. The journey we took was not just to a planet, but to a philosophy written in the language of physics that preaches a sermon of peace, balance, and hope. It is a story that, once heard, becomes a part of you, a quiet, reassuring hum in the background of your thoughts, a reminder of the impossible, tranquil beauty that the cosmos holds in its heart. And so, our journey through the looking glass comes to a close. We have walked on a world where the ground gently pushes us toward the stars. We have felt the chill of a sunbeam and the warmth of a moonless night. We have witnessed the impossible miracle of a shattered tree making itself whole again, and contemplated a life lived from old age back to the vibrant disappearance of youth. Antihtton is more than a celestial body. It is a profound cosmic lesson. It teaches us that the laws we hold to be absolute are perhaps just local customs. It whispers that the universe, in its boundless expanse, contains not only chaos and decay, but also order, restoration, and a deep, abiding peace. The universe is not just stranger than we imagine. It is gentler than we can conceive. As you drift now into a deep and peaceful sleep, carry this image with you. The image of a world without falling. A world where every river flows back to its source. A world where every ending is simply a return. Thank you for joining this journey. May your rest be as deep and serene as the celestial seas of Antihtton. Before you drift away completely, I have one question for you. If you could experience one single reverse phenomenon from this incredible world, what would it be? The upward falling rain, the cold fire, or the journey back to youth? Let us know in the comments below. Please subscribe for more lectures for sleep, and give this video a like if it helped you find a moment of peace. Sleep well.